Federation forces have brought diplomatic channels to its knees as Operation Don't Suck got leaked to the Northern High Command. There's only going to be one winner when this firefight goes hot, and guess what? I'm recording it. My brother is rolling the Federation with a Paratrooper cadre and a Strike cadre with that incredibly nasty Roaring Grizzly, while the ESE, proudly representing the Ouchies Republic, is bringing in the humanist allies to give them just a little extra punch in repelling the UMFA aggressor. In this diplomatic standoff gone hot, the UMFA must prevent the Ouchies from re-incurring into the land that they proudly own and keep their paratrooper cadre alive. They cannot afford to lose this elite detachment of units. The proud people of the Republic, however, need to keep the Sagittarius and the Visigoth alive. It is the most expensive piece of equipment that they have on the field, barring the humanist equipment, and they must move the civilians off. They need to protect the compound so that they can escort them to a place where the UMFA aggression will not affect them. Deployment is fairly straightforward for the South, as we have more platoons than him. I need to place an item down that is going to have the least effect on how he deploys. So I place down the Venomous Sagittarius in the center of the board so that he can swing one way or the other and immediately duck into cover so he can't get the victory point for killing him. And then he places in his next cadre, which is the entire Strike cadre. He puts the Roaring Grizzlies in the woods up in the north and the rest in the woods along the center to be able to take on the civilian compound. And as the final deployment, the South places down the Spark Sagittarius, the Naga, Nash, and the rest of the gear cadre in the civilian compound down to the south so that they can immediately move in and take control of it. Now, my immediate objective is actually to try to break the blockade. I'm going to run the Naga and the two Sagittarius Sparks up the right side of the board and hopefully take on his Grizzly, mano a mano. I really want to see those things die. And for the most part, I'm right in being absolutely terrified of them, because not only are they hard to put down by the rest of the equipment in the list, they can also put down the biggest equipment I have. And those guided mortars are so nasty when you leave them to their own devices. And just as they do, the first shot right out of the game is to land a concentrated barrage of fire on the Spark Sagittarius on the right side of the board. He takes it pretty well though, taking two guided mortar shots, and some of the MRPs manage to land, and it puts him down into light damage. I actually burned all my command point allotment for this, trying to be able to get him to live through that, and it just wasn't enough. Nonetheless, I moved the Nagas forward, I moved the whole Strider cadre forward, because we're just going to make a mess of him. You can't kill them all, right? So just move him forward, and we'll take care of him when he gets in range. Early shots are fairly fruitless against him. He was smart enough to keep the Grizzlies just far enough back and in such a way that around the woods that it was actually hard to hit. He ends up using a reroll to try to keep them from dying from just an MRP shot at long range, and he manages to make all the shots bounce. Gears in the settlement begin moving forward, and they are all surrounding the compound that we need to protect. The ESE has the compound mostly in their own possession, and already the gears are starting to take hull down positions near the building. And with nothing better to shoot at, he has snuck a Tiger up behind the hill in the middle of the map, and he is making the forward observations against all the Striders that are charging forward across the hilly terrain. And they light him up. They manage to land an ATM right next to him, and it manages to only put him into light. He just barely dodged a bullet on that one. But despite this, the Strider cadre moves forward. The People's Republia is going to be able to take on the UMFA aggressors and teach them the meaning of insolence just as soon as they get closer. Just give them a few more targets. They just need to get out there out in the open. And as he wins the initiative again with his leadership for pilot, which kind of makes it a completely foregone conclusion that the ESE would ever win the initiative, he moves one of the Grizzlies out into the open, presumably to get a better shot on some of the Striders, or at least forward observe for himself. Nonetheless, as he does, he manages to elicit a whole slew of reaction fire from the Striders out in the open, and manages to weather it for the most part. However, the center field is in dire contention, as allowing the Striders to move through uncontested is going to put the Grizzlies in a tight spot. So he moves the Jaguar CO over, and he moves the other Jaguar that is behind the hill into a better defensible position while he pulls another Hunter in to protect, and the Grizzly manages to land home another guided mortar shot, killing the humanist Spark Sagittarius that is on the right side of the board, leaving the south less one Strider for the effort. But he got his shots off. It was important to make him reaction fire off his shots because he wasn't going to get it. Nonetheless, the Naga is making a mess of anything that moves out in the field with its ATMs and AGMs, managing to fire the AGM and defensive fire, or at least reaction fire, wherever it can, and then opting for the ATM during its own turn when it can target designate and then fire, often with a command point. Spark Sagittarius moves forward, starts laying in the pain with its double LPAs. It's not a bad close-in weapon with its MRP as a backup, while the Naga starts slowing it up, firing in the distance. Blitz Visigoth moves up the city center and starts taking up position in the middle of the town. Now they have a tank on the west side of the UMFA reserves that they have to deal with, and the Striders charging up the eastern side, leaving the UMFA in a tight position. They need some support wherever they can get it. But with that awesome leadership 4, he goes ahead and pulls in the Paratroopers early, taking them out of guaranteed reserves and placing them next to the settlement early, allowing them to take on the gears that have fortified themselves into the position and keep them from taking on the remaining strike gears that are hiding out in the woods. Hold on, it's gonna get rough. Have you ever wondered where the massive cash allotments that I get from ad revenue on this website go? It's not hookers and blow, I assure you. It's not. It's actually the UNHCR. It's a charity agency. Specifically, most of it goes to the Syria Fund, and I've matched dollar for dollar into it, and I assure you should go check it out. The cavalry has arrived for the UMFA, but they lose initiative. They have 4 dice to roll for it, but I managed to take it from them, and I have just a very narrow chance. Do I fire the Blitz Visigoth at the Paratroopers landing at the ground, or do I use all the gears? I figure it's better to be safe rather than sorry, and I activate the gears, pulling them into defensive positions where I can, because they were hulled down expecting an assault from the front, and then they just open up with all their small arms at the gears that are caught flat-footed out in the open. This is a die roll that he should have gotten. This is pandemonium as the ESE troops light them up round after round. He fires back in futility with his grenade launchers, knowing that they're about to be put down like the parachuted flying dogs that they are. This is going down like the beach landing in Saving Private Ryan, as the parachuters have nowhere to go and they are just chewed up round after round. I kill his platoon leader. I put critical and light damage boxes on nearly everyone else, even though one of the Jaegers out there couldn't find cover and he just opened up in an utter panic. He can't seem to put him down, as that gear fights for his life and manages to get all his defense rolls in such a dramatic fashion that I have never rolled, or at least I haven't rolled quite so well in this game, because the guy was out in the open and he can't seem to hit the broadside of the barn, despite the Jaeger opening up like Rambo against the parachuting UMFA gears. Alternatively speaking, if Saving Private Ryan isn't your thing, this is a lot like the shower scene from The Rock, as he's just desperately hammering away at anything that he could possibly get a shot on, and we're just putting him down. The paratroopers start looking for cover, laying down suppressive fire with their grenade launcher, but they can't just seem to make anything come home. Even the Blitz Visigoth manages to get out, get its presence felt, and starts laying down the hurt. I have to burn a couple command points just to give him the actions necessary to make his presence felt, because this isn't an opportunity that we're going to find ourselves in again, as the paratroopers are completely pinned, damaged, and otherwise completely inert to the rest of the tactical situation. Strike group elements locked in the woods begin moving out, trying to lay the pressure off of the paratrooper element, and manages to actually get a couple shots down range and puts a shot into the back of one of the black mambas, taking advantage of its critical back arc and actually critically damages it, leaving it almost functionless for the rest of the game. The rest of the units, however, are busy moving out into the open field to try to take on the Striders and keep them from taking on the Grizzlies that are out there on their own. And among those Jaguars moving out into the open, they do have an ATM launcher, which is more than capable of dealing with those Spark Sagittarius. Not that he necessarily needs to, because the Grizzlies out in the open have direct line of sight to those Striders, and they begin pummeling once again with the MRP launchers and the guided mortars. They manage to put down one of the Spark Sagittarius by itself. The Venomous Sagittarius manages to launch its rocket launcher at the paratroopers out in the open and completely demoralizes them, sending more damage into the already stricken paratrooper group. Meanwhile, the Naga has held the field. Holding the center of the field, his ATM and AGM has completely dictated the pace of the engagement, as the two gears out there to confront him do not want to get seen by him, as the ATM and the AGM has been held in reserve that they can pop a shot off at anything that decides to make itself apparent. Even the Grizzly at range doesn't want to get within line of sight of him, because the ATM launcher can still completely destroy him at his own pace. And knowing when to time your shots is important in a game like this, especially with an AGM and the ATM. I managed to pop a few rounds of the AGM at the hunter that is hiding right behind the hill sign. He manages to live despite himself by fluke alone, and manages to fire the ATM at range at the Grizzly along the northern side of the board and puts it down, leaving the North short one more gear. With the southern front all but taken care of, now it is left to the striker gears on the northern end of the board to hold the table. They got to keep the blockade from moving through, and if at all possible, try to take the city center. Though even now, my brother has assumed that the center is not something that he should be fighting for. In fact, the paratroopers are at this point fighting for their lives. Striker gears begin moving along the center, and I open up on them. Reaction fire out the wazoo as I manage to fire the ATM off the hip and then fire the AGM at the other gear that decided to come up around the corner. I was not going to allow them to get their AGM off at the already lightly damaged Naga and keep it out of the game completely. Striker Jaguar moves into the settlement center on the left side of the board and elicits a whole lot of attention from the Blitz Visigoth as he pans over, takes a look at him, and I managed to light him up as well, paying him in dividend for the damage that he did to the Black Mamba's rear arc, crippling it. The ESE General Purpose Cadre begins moving forward, again holding on to the center of the settlement and just laying in a withering supply of fire into the paratroopers, singling them out and putting down the surviving members in their last turn of life. At this point, the Federation has been whittled down to just a Jaguar gear that has been crippled and embattled in the settlement, a Grizzly on the northern end, and I do believe a hunter that is hiding in the woods somewhere. And even though it's looking pretty grim for the Federation, the surviving Grizzly beads in on the Naga, lays in a withering supply of fire, kills it, and in response, the South lights up the Jaguar that bought the time for the rest of his compadres. The Grizzly still held the blockade, but they lost the war, giving the win to the ESE and the Ouchies Republic. They got 3 points for holding their blockade, which is pretty good considering, but the ESE would manage to get all of their victory points. It was a good game. And this has been an Ouchies Batrep, and thanks for watching. And check it out, there's gonna be a rematch, just you wait.